The artificial gravity hiccuped again, and Lieutenant Jake Morrison's coffee mug performed a brief ballet in midair before he caught it with practiced reflexes. 3 months aboard the Meridian's edge had taught him that the ship's gravity stabilizers had about as much reliability as his grandmother's ancient hovercar, functional most of the time, but prone to sudden fits of mechanical rebellion. Still getting used to interstellar travel. The voice carried a musical quality that made Jake look up from his terminal. Zarathiel stood in the doorway of Communications Bay 7, her elongated ears twitching with what he'd learned was amusement. Those ears were the only thing that marked her as non-human. Well, that, and her unsettling ability to ask questions that made him question everything he thought he knew about his own species. "Oh, I'm fine," Jake replied, gesturing at his floating beverage. "It's the coffee that's having an existential crisis." Her ears perked forward with genuine curiosity. Existential crisis. I am not familiar with this term, in relation to beverages. 3 months and she still took everything literally. Jake grinned as he secured his mug in the terminal's cup holder. "It's a joke, Zara. The coffee can't actually have thoughts about its place in the universe." She stepped into the bay, her regulation jumpsuit rustling softly. Human humor remains, challenging to decode. "Tell me about it. Half the time I don't understand it either, and I've been human my whole life." This earned him another ear twitch, which Jake had learned was the Velthari equivalent of a polite chuckle. Zara settled into the chair across from his workstation, pulling out her ever-present data pad. The thing looked like it was carved from a single piece of crystalline material, typical Velthari tech, all flowing curves and embedded luminescence. "Today's cultural observation assignment," she announced, tapping the pad's surface. The device responded with a soft harmonic chime. "Captain Rodriguez has requested I document human social bonding behaviors during recreational periods." Jake nearly choked on his coffee. Social bonding behaviors, that sounds ominous. "I believe she means friendships and social interactions," Zara clarified, though her ears betrayed a hint of uncertainty. "Unless humans have more complex arrangements I should be aware of." No, friendship is complicated enough. Trust me on that one." The ship's intercom crackled to life, delivering Chief Engineer Kowalski's voice in its usual gravelly monotone. "Attention all personnel. We're experiencing minor fluctuations in the quantum resonance chambers. Please secure any sensitive equipment and prepare for potential temporal displacement anomalies." Jake and Zara exchanged glances. Temporal displacement anomalies. Zara's ears had gone completely flat against her head. "Should we be concerned?" "Nah," Jake waved dismissively. "Kowalski talks like that when he means the engine's making weird noises. Last week he announced a catastrophic hull integrity failure because someone left a porthole open. You seem remarkably calm about potential temporal displacement." Years of military service teach you to distinguish between actual emergencies and engineers having vocabulary issues. Jake stood and stretched, his joints popping in the artificial atmosphere. "Come on, let's grab some lunch." You can observe humans in their natural habitat, complaining about cafeteria food. The mess hall buzzed with the usual midday chaos. Human crew members clustered around tables, their conversations a mixture of technical jargon, gossip, and complaints about the synthetic protein dispensers. The Velthari contingent occupied their own section, eating in their characteristic meditative silence while occasionally exchanging what looked like meaningful glances. Jake loaded his tray with something the dispenser optimistically labeled beef stroganoff, and found an empty table. Zara followed with her own meal, a collection of geometrically precise cubes that somehow managed to be every color of the rainbow simultaneously. "Velthari rations?" Jake asked, eyeing the colorful display. "Nutritional optimization matrices," Zara corrected, spearing a purple cube with her utensil. "Each component provides precise molecular requirements for optimal cellular function." Right, we just call ours lunch and hope for the best. Zara paused mid-bite, her ears swiveling toward a nearby table where Ensign Davies was gesticulating wildly while recounting some story to his companions. Explain this behavior. The human is making exaggerated physical movements while speaking. Is he experiencing a medical emergency? Jake glanced over and laughed. He's telling a joke. Probably about the time he accidentally launched himself out of an airlock during EVA training. This is considered entertaining. Apparently, Davies has been telling that same story for 2 years and people still laugh. Fascinating. Zara made a note on her pad. Human social bonding appears to include repetitive narrative sharing, even when the information content remains constant. You make us sound like malfunctioning computers. Not malfunctioning, she said seriously. Simply, operating according to different parameters than I expected. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the Velthari section. Elder Thisara had risen from her seat and was addressing the other aliens in their liquid, melodic language. Jake couldn't understand the words, but the tone seemed urgent. "Everything okay over there?" he asked. Zara's ears had gone rigid. The elder is discussing cultural protocols, something about maintaining proper boundaries during interspecies cooperation. Sounds thrilling. Jake, Zara's voice carried an odd note of warning. Perhaps we should discuss appropriate social behaviors between our species to avoid misunderstandings. What kind of misunderstandings? Before she could answer, the lights flickered, and the ship's engines hummed with a subtly different pitch. The quantum resonance chambers, Jake realized. Kowalski hadn't been exaggerating after all. "Attention, all personnel," Captain Rodriguez's voice filled the mess hall. "We're experiencing minor gravitational anomalies. Please remain seated and secure all loose objects." As if summoned by her words, Jake's fork decided to achieve orbit around his head. He snatched it out of the air just as Zara's rainbow cubes began a synchronized floating dance above their table. "So much for normal lunch conversation," Jake muttered, trying to corral the wayward food. Zara was staring at the floating cubes with an expression of pure wonder. The gravitational fields are creating a harmonic resonance with the nutritional matrices. It's beautiful. "It's Tuesday on a diplomatic vessel," Jake corrected, but he found himself smiling at her amazement. 3 months of traveling together, and she still found magic in the mundane chaos of human space travel. The gravitational anomaly passed, depositing their lunch back onto their trays with varying degrees of success. Jake Stroganoff had achieved an abstract art arrangement, while Zara's cubes had somehow reorganized themselves into a perfect spiral pattern. "Your food has achieved geometric optimization," she observed. "Your food was already geometrically optimized. Mine just gave up and embraced chaos." Another ear twitch of amusement. "I am beginning to understand human humor. It often involves finding patterns in apparent disorder." "Now you're getting it." The rest of lunch passed in comfortable conversation, with Zara asking increasingly specific questions about human social customs and Jake providing answers that probably made humanity sound like a species of friendly lunatics, which he reflected wasn't entirely inaccurate. As they prepared to leave, Zara paused at the mess hall entrance. "Jake, I want to thank you for your patience with my questions. I know my cultural observations must seem intrusive." "Are you kidding? It's refreshing to talk to someone who thinks everything we do is fascinating instead of just crazy." "I do not think humans are crazy," she said seriously. "Complex perhaps, unpredictable, but not crazy." High praise from an alien diplomat. Her ears did that twitchy thing again, and Jake felt an odd warmth in his chest. Somewhere behind them, Elder Thisara was still conducting her earnest discussion about cultural protocols, but Jake found he wasn't particularly interested in proper boundaries or interspecies cooperation guidelines. He was more interested in the way Zara's eyes lit up when she laughed, and how her ears betrayed every emotion she tried to hide. 3 months of friendship had taught him to read those subtle signals, and right now they were saying something he didn't quite understand but found surprisingly appealing. The ship's intercom crackled again. All personnel to stations. We're approaching the Kepler research station. Their first official diplomatic mission together. Jake grinned as they headed toward their respective duty stations, ready to observe some more human social bonding behaviors. I believe I am beginning to appreciate the complexity of the task, Zara replied, her ears perked forward with anticipation. Neither of them noticed Elder Thesara watching their departure with an expression of deep concern. The emergency klaxons screamed through the corridors of the Meridian's edge like banshees, with particularly bad timing. Jake Morrison found himself pressed against the bulkhead of maintenance shaft C7, watching sparks cascade from overhead conduits like the universe's most inconvenient fireworks display. "Well," he said to the darkness, "this is definitely not how I plan to spend my Tuesday." A soft thump echoed from the other side of the shaft, followed by a distinctly unhuman curse in melodic Velthari. "Jake, are you injured?" "Just my pride," he called back, "and possibly my faith in ship maintenance schedules. You okay, Zara?" "I believe I am functional, though the artificial gravity appears to have opinions about our current orientation." Jake couldn't help but grin despite their predicament. 3 hours ago, they'd been conducting a routine inspection of the communication arrays when the ion storm hit. The ship's automated systems had sealed them into the maintenance shaft faster than Jake could say catastrophic systems failure, which, given recent events, had become his least favorite phrase in Standard. "The emergency lighting should activate any moment." Zara's voice drifted through the narrow space between them. Velthari engineering principles suggest that backup systems engage within 4-7 minutes of primary power loss. Human engineering principles suggest that backup systems engage whenever they feel like it, Jake replied. "Usually right after you've given up hope and started composing your last will and testament." As if summoned by his pessimism, dim red emergency lights flickered to life, casting everything in the color of overripe tomatoes. Jake could see Zara now, wedged into the opposite corner of the shaft, her elongated ears pressed flat against her head in what he'd learned was the Velthari equivalent of mild panic. "The crimson illumination is not particularly flattering," she observed, attempting to straighten her rumpled jumpsuit. "Red lighting makes everyone look like they're either dying dramatically or auditioning for a role in a horror holovid," Jake agreed. "It's one of the fundamental laws of emergency situations." The ship shuddered around them, and somewhere in the distance, Chief Engineer Kowalski's voice echoed through the ventilation system. "Will someone please explain to me why the plasma conduits are singing opera?" Jake and Zara exchanged glances. Singing opera. Zara's ears perked forward with curiosity despite their circumstances. "Ion storms do weird things to ship systems," Jake explained. "Last time we hit one, the food dispensers started dispensing everything in haiku format. Took engineering 3 days to convince them that beef stew, hot and brown, steam rises like morning mist. Lunch is now complete wasn't actually helpful. Your species has a remarkable ability to find humor in potentially fatal situations. It's either laugh or cry, and crying fogs up your helmet visor." They settled into the cramped space as best they could, Jake's back against one bulkhead, Zara curled in the opposite corner with her knees drawn up. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows across her features, making her look almost ethereal, if ethereal beings wore regulation jumpsuits and had grease smudges on their cheeks. "Tell me about Earth," Zara said suddenly. "Your real Earth, not the diplomatic briefings and cultural databases." Jake was surprised by the request. "What do you want to know?" "Everything, what it feels like, what it smells like, what makes it home." He leaned back against the bulkhead, letting his mind drift to memories of blue skies and actual weather. "Earth smells like rain on concrete and coffee brewing and ocean salt. It feels like chaos, but the good kind. Controlled chaos. Like a jazz musician who looks like they're making it up as they go along, but actually knows exactly what they're doing. Controlled chaos, Zara repeated thoughtfully. This explains much about human behavior. But what about Velthari? What's your homeworld like? Zara's expression grew distant. Velthara is precise, beautiful in its precision. Our cities grow from living crystal that responds to emotion and need. The architecture shifts based on the collective harmony of its inhabitants. Streets widen when people need space. Buildings provide shelter when storms come. The very foundations pulse with the heartbeat of the community. That sounds incredible. It is also suffocating sometimes. Her ears drooped slightly. Every emotion is shared, every decision considered by the collective. There is no hiding, no privacy, no moments of beautiful chaos like your Earth. Jake studied her face in the red lighting. Is that why you volunteered for this mission? Partially. She was quiet for a moment. My family expects me to return home and accept a bonding arranged by the elders. A proper Velthari male from a prestigious family line. Someone who will help maintain the harmony of our house. Sounds like you're not thrilled about that plan. The individual selected is suitable, intelligent, well-regarded, emotionally stable. Everything a bonding partner should be according to our traditions. But when I speak with him, I feel nothing. No spark, no curiosity, no desire to know what he thinks about when the moons rise or whether he ever wonders what lies beyond the crystal spires of our cities. She looked at Jake directly. Does that make me selfish? It makes you human, Jake said, then caught himself. Sorry, I understand the sentiment. Her ears twitched with amusement. Perhaps spending time with humans has affected me more than I realized. The ship lurched again, and Jake instinctively reached out to steady Zara as she was thrown off balance. His hand caught her arm, and for a moment they were very close in the cramped space, close enough that he could see the complex patterns of silver and gold that flecked through her dark eyes. My family has served in the military for 6 generations, he heard himself saying. My father, my grandfather, my great-grandmother who helped establish the first orbital defense platforms. Everyone expected me to follow the family tradition, rise through the ranks, maybe make admiral someday. But you became a communications specialist. Because what I really wanted was to study xenobiology. To understand how life develops differently on different worlds, what makes each species unique and amazing in their own way. He laughed, a sound tinged with old frustration. Try explaining to a room full of decorated war heroes that you'd rather study alien plant life than blow up enemy vessels. They did not understand. They understood that I was disappointing them. That's about it. Zara shifted closer, her voice gentle. For what it is worth, I believe xenobiology's loss was communications gain. You have a gift for helping others. Before Jake could ask what she meant, the emergency lighting brightened and the ship's intercom crackled to life. Attention all personnel, Captain Rodriguez's voice filled the shaft. The ion storm has passed, and we're beginning emergency repairs. Rescue teams are being dispatched to all sealed compartments. Please remain calm and await assistance. Hear that? Jake said cheerfully. We're saved. And I didn't even have to compose that last will and testament. But Zara wasn't smiling. She was staring at him with an expression of dawning horror, as if she just realized something terrible. The rescue team arrived 20 minutes later, cutting through the sealed bulkhead with plasma torches and flooding the shaft with blessed normal lighting. Jake emerged first, stretching muscles cramped from hours in the confined space, chattering happily to the medical technician about their adventure in emergency bonding. Behind him, Zara followed in complete silence, her ears pressed flat against her head and her eyes never leaving his face. Jake Morrison was beginning to suspect that something was seriously wrong with the ship's atmospheric recycling system. Either that or he developed some kind of space-induced paranoia, because everywhere he went, Velthari crew members were staring at him like he'd grown a second head. "Morning, Velnara," he greeted one of the junior diplomats in the corridor outside his quarters. The alien's ears shot up so fast Jake worried she might achieve liftoff. "Lieutenant Morrison," she replied in a voice pitched about 3 octaves higher than normal. "I hope you are experiencing optimal rest cycles and." She seemed to run out of words, turned an interesting shade of purple, and fled down the corridor at a speed that probably violated several safety regulations. "Okay," Jake muttered to himself, "that was weird." Things didn't improve at breakfast. The Velthari section of the mess hall buzzed with whispered conversations that stopped abruptly whenever he walked by. Jake caught fragments in standard words like sacred and unprecedented and poor child, but nothing that made sense. He was contemplating the philosophical implications of synthetic scrambled eggs when Lieutenant Chen slid into the seat across from him, her expression mixing curiosity with barely contained amusement. "So," she said without preamble, "want to explain why half the alien delegation looks like they're attending your funeral?" "Your guess is as good as mine," Jake replied. "I think I might have inadvertently violated some cultural taboo. Maybe I used the wrong fork at dinner last night." "The wrong fork wouldn't make Elder Thisara request a private meeting with Captain Rodriguez about your intentions." Jake paused, a forkful of eggs halfway to his mouth. "My what now?" "Your intentions. Toward a certain cultural liaison with pointy ears and an apparent talent for causing interdepartmental incidents." "Zara." Jake's stomach did something complicated. "What kind of intentions?" Chen leaned forward conspiratorially. "The romantic kind, according to the ship's rumor mill. Apparently, you two had some kind of moment during yesterday's emergency. We were trapped in a maintenance shaft for 3 hours. The only moment we had was me explaining why human food dispensers don't write poetry." "Right." Chen's expression suggested she found his explanation about as convincing as a Ferengi selling authentic Earth artifacts. "And that's why she's been hiding in her quarters ever since, and you haven't seen her for 18 hours. Jake realized she was right. Zara hadn't shown up for their usual morning briefing, hadn't responded to his comm messages, and hadn't appeared in any of the common areas where he'd looked for her. "Maybe she's sick," he offered weakly. And maybe the quantum drive runs on happy thoughts and good intentions." Before Jake could formulate a response, his comm unit chirped with an incoming message from Captain Rodriguez. "Lieutenant Morrison, please report to Conference Room Alpha at 900 hours for a diplomatic consultation." Chen grinned at his obvious confusion. "Good luck explaining your intentions to the captain." Conference Room Alpha contained more brass and diplomatic credentials than Jake had seen since his commissioning ceremony. Captain Rodriguez sat at the head of the table, flanked by Commander Stevens from Security and Ambassador Walsh from the Diplomatic Corps. Across from them, Elder Thisara occupied her chair with the serene dignity of someone about to deliver either a blessing or a death sentence. "Lieutenant Morrison," Captain Rodriguez began, "we need to discuss your recent interaction with Cultural Liaison Zarathiel." "Our interaction, ma'am." Jake felt like he was navigating a conversational minefield blindfolded. "Could you be more specific?" Elder Thisara leaned forward, her ancient eyes fixing on Jake with unsettling intensity. "Young human, it has come to our attention that certain gestures were exchanged during your recent confinement." "Gestures?" Jake's mind raced through every moment of their time in the maintenance shaft. "We talked about our homeworlds, shared some personal stories, discussed career choices. Did she or did she not make physical contact?" Ambassador Walsh interrupted, consulting his data pad with the air of a prosecutor presenting evidence. "Well, yes, but what kind of physical contact?" Captain Rodriguez asked, though something in her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Jake felt heat rising in his cheeks. "She bit my arm, but it was just playful like a joke or—" The room erupted into chaos. Ambassador Walsh dropped his data pad, Commander Stevens muttered something that sounded like, "Oh, hell." Captain Rodriguez buried her face in her hands. Elder Thesara, however, remained perfectly calm. "I see. And what was your response to this playful gesture?" "I laughed," Jake said, feeling increasingly like he was confessing to accidentally starting an interstellar war. "I thought it was funny, weird but funny." "You laughed." Elder Thesara's voice held no judgment, but somehow Jake felt like he'd just admitted to kicking puppies. "And you made no reciprocal gesture." Was I supposed to bite her back? Because that seems unsanitary, and probably against about 12 different health regulations. The silence that followed was so profound Jake could hear the ship's life support systems humming in the walls. "Lieutenant," Captain Rodriguez said finally, "in Velthari culture, what Zarathiel did to you is equivalent to, well, it's roughly analogous to proposing marriage." Jake felt the universe tilt sideways. "I'm sorry, what?" "The bonding bite," Elder Thesara explained with infinite patience, "is the most sacred gesture in our culture. It signifies the choosing of a life mate, the commitment of souls, the—" Wait. Jake held up his hands. "Are you telling me that I'm accidentally married to Zara?" "Not married precisely." Ambassador Walsh consulted his notes frantically. "But engaged in a sense. The bonding bite creates an expectation of formal ceremony and—" "I thought she was just being weird." Jake protested. "Aliens do weird things all the time. Yesterday, Ensign Telvar started vibrating during lunch because someone mentioned chocolate cake." "Telvar is from Rigel 7, Commander Stevens offered helpfully. "They vibrate when experiencing strong positive emotions." "See, weird alien behavior. How was I supposed to know biting meant eternal commitment?" Elder Thesara's ears drooped slightly. "It is troubling that young Zarathiel would make such a gesture without ensuring proper understanding. This suggests either extreme emotional distress or—" She paused delicately. "Genuine affection overcoming cultural conditioning." Captain Rodriguez rubbed her temples. "Lieutenant, we need to resolve this situation before it becomes a diplomatic incident. The Velthari Council is already asking questions about human intentions toward their people. Can I just unbite her, issue a formal apology, explain that it was a cultural misunderstanding?" "The bonding bite cannot be undone," Elder Thesara said gently. "Once given and accepted." "But I didn't accept it. I didn't even know what it was." "You laughed," Ambassador Walsh pointed out. "In many cultures, laughter is considered a form of acceptance or approval. In human culture, laughter is what we do when we don't know what else to do." Jake stood up, pacing to the conference room's viewport. Outside, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, completely indifferent to his suddenly complicated life. "This is insane. I'm not ready for alien marriage. I haven't even figured out regular human dating." "Lieutenant," Captain Rodriguez's voice carried a note of sympathetic authority, "I understand this is overwhelming, but we need to handle this delicately. The Velthari take bonding ceremonies very seriously." "How seriously?" Elder Thesara's expression grew solemn. "Rejecting a bonding bite brings great shame to the one who offered it. In extreme cases, it can result in exile from Velthari society." Jake's stomach dropped. "Exile?" "Zarathiel has not emerged from her quarters since yesterday," the elder continued. "She refuses to speak with her own people, will not take nourishment, and has requested that all her personal effects be prepared for disposal." The implications hit Jake like a meteor strike. Zara was hiding because she was ashamed. She thought he'd rejected her, and in her culture, that rejection was devastating enough to warrant social suicide. "I need to talk to her," he said immediately. "That would not be advisable," Elder Thesara replied. "Until this matter is resolved, contact between you could complicate." "With all due respect, Elder," Jake interrupted, "she's my friend. And if she's suffering because of a misunderstanding, I'm going to fix it." He was halfway to the door when Captain Rodriguez's voice stopped him. "Morrison, be very careful what you say to her. Velthari emotional bonds are intense." Don't make promises you can't keep. Jake nodded and headed for the door, his mind racing with everything he'd learned and everything he still didn't understand. Behind him, he heard Ambassador Walsh mutter to Commander Stevens, "Think we should warn him that the bonding ceremony involves singing." Let's see if he survives the conversation first," Stevens replied. The door to Zara's quarters had been sealed for 26 hours, 14 minutes and 37 seconds. Jake knew this because he'd been standing outside it for the last 10 minutes, trying to work up the courage to press the door chime. "Just press the button, Morrison," he muttered to himself. "How hard can it be?" Apparently, very hard when you're about to have a conversation that might accidentally end with you married to an alien diplomat. Or worse, might end with said diplomat being exiled from her homeworld because of your complete inability to recognize romantic gestures from other species. He pressed the chime. Silence. "Zara, it's Jake. I know you're in there because Lieutenant Chen saw your food dispenser activating, and unless your quarters have achieved sentience and developed an appetite for nutritional optimization cubes, you're definitely home." More silence, but Jake thought he heard something that might have been movement. "Look, I know this is awkward. Believe me, I've had conversations with my commanding officers about my romantic intentions that I never thought I'd have to have. Apparently, according to Starfleet Regulation 847.3, accidentally getting engaged to an alien diplomat requires filing paperwork in triplicate." A soft sound that might have been a laugh came from the other side of the door. "I'm not going away," Jake continued. "I once spent 14 hours explaining human mating rituals to a Vulcan anthropologist who kept taking notes. This conversation can't possibly be more embarrassing than that." The door slid open so suddenly Jake nearly fell forward into the room. Zara stood in the doorway, her ears flat against her head and her eyes puffy in a way that suggested she'd been crying. She looked smaller somehow, fragile in a way that made Jake's chest tighten. "You should not be here," she said quietly. "Elder Thesara will be displeased if she discovers." "Let me worry about the Elder," Jake interrupted. "Right now, I'm more concerned about you hiding in your room like the universe is ending." "For me, it might as well be." Zara stepped back, allowing him to enter. Her quarters were sparse but somehow warm, filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with soft light. "I have brought shame upon my family, my house, and my entire delegation." Jake looked around the room, noting the packed belongings and the formal documents spread across her desk. "Are those exile papers?" "Formal requests for dishonor removal from family lineage," she confirmed matter-of-factly. "It is the proper response to such a catastrophic cultural transgression." Catastrophic cultural transgression. Jake couldn't help but grin. "Zara, you bit my arm. It wasn't exactly the signing of the Treaty of Versailles." Her ears twitched slightly. "You do not understand the significance." "Actually, I do now. Elder Thesara gave me a very thorough education in Velthari bonding customs this morning. Apparently, I'm supposed to be mortally offended by your proposal and demand formal satisfaction, or accept your gesture and prepare for a lifetime of emotional harmony." Zara's face went very pale. "And which option have you chosen?" Jake settled into the chair across from her, suddenly serious. "That depends. Why did you do it?" Zara's ears drooped further. "I do not know. In that moment, trapped in the darkness, listening to you speak about your dreams and disappointments, I felt connected. Not the mandated emotional harmony of my people, but something individual and choice-based. When you spoke of wanting to study life from other worlds, of being misunderstood by your family, I recognized something of myself." "So you bit me." "So I chose you," she corrected softly. "Without thought, without cultural consultation, without considering the consequences. I simply chose." Jake was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the soft, crystalline light. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "If I had known what it meant, what would you have wanted me to do?" Zara's laugh held no humor. "It does not matter now. You cannot unknow what you know, and I cannot take back what I have done. But hypothetically, if I had understood in that moment what you were offering, what would you have hoped for? Her ears came up slightly, and for the first time since he'd entered, she met his eyes directly. I would have hoped that you might choose me back, even knowing it would complicate everything. Your family, your career, the diplomatic mission. Even knowing all of that. Jake stood up, walking to the viewport that looked out over the star field. You know what the funny thing is? When Elder Thesara was explaining bonding ceremonies to me this morning, all I could think about was how horrified my parents are going to be when they find out their son is marrying an alien diplomat instead of following family tradition and becoming a proper military officer. Jake, and then I realized something. He turned back to her, smiling. They're going to be horrified no matter what I do with my life, because I'm never going to be the person they want me to be. But maybe, just maybe, I could be the person you want me to be. Zara's ears shot up straight. What are you saying? I'm saying that yesterday, trapped in that maintenance shaft, I felt something too. Something that had nothing to do with artificial gravity failures or emergency lighting, and everything to do with the way you laughed at my terrible jokes and trusted me with your secrets. But the cultural complications. Our problems we'll solve together. Jake moved closer, settling back into his chair. Zara, I've spent my entire adult life trying to fit into boxes that were designed for someone else. Military officer, proper human male, dutiful son. But with you I just get to be me. Terrible jokes, questionable career choices, and all. Tears were running down her cheeks now, but her ears had perked forward with something that looked like hope. The bonding ceremony is quite complex. There will be singing. I like singing. I'm terrible at it, but I like it. There are ritual exchanges of family histories, going back 12 generations. My family history is mostly soldiers and farmers with occasional bouts of spectacular bad judgment. Your family will love it. The ceremony lasts for 3 days. Jake grinned. Good thing I saved up my vacation time. Zara launched herself across the small space between them, wrapping her arms around his neck with enough force to nearly knock him out of his chair. Are you certain? She whispered against his shoulder. This cannot be undone, and there will be complications. Zara, Jake interrupted gently, I spent 3 months learning to read your emotional ears and memorizing which jokes make you laugh. I think I was already committed. I just didn't realize it yet. She pulled back to look at him, her face radiant with joy and tears. I love you, Jake Morrison. I love you too, Zarathiel, even if you do bite. Her laugh was like music, bright and clear and full of possibility. I promise to warn you next time I am about to make a culturally significant romantic gesture. Appreciated. Though I have to admit, your approach was certainly memorable. 3 weeks later, the Meridian's Edge hosted its first interspecies bonding ceremony. The event required extensive diplomatic preparation, cultural consultation, and the modification of 17 different safety protocols to accommodate Velthari singing crystals. Jake stood in the ship's main assembly hall, wearing a formal uniform that Elder Thesara had declared acceptably reverent for the occasion, watching as his parents' holographic representations tried to